Welcome to Torah Smash, the podcast for nerdy Jews, where our lives of Jewish learning collide with our love of nerd culture. In each episode, we discuss what we lovingly call a Torah Smash, which we have defined as a beautiful collision of one thing from the world of Judaism with another from nerd culture. I am RDY, and joining me today are
Barack Malkin,
Ethan Lane Miller,
and Josh Fixler.
That's right. Our guest for today's episode is returning guest host, Rabbi Josh Fixler.
I'm back, baby!
Josh is a rabbi at Congregation Emmanuel in Houston, Texas. He is the proprietor of the Golem Museum, his social media project where he posts on Instagram about his sizable collection of paraphernalia related to Jewish mythological creatures made of mud. Josh is proudly raising his three daughters to be nerds like him. He spends his weekends building Star Wars Lego sets with his daughters, and recently he and his wife visited New York and saw the maximum number of Broadway shows which one can see in 3 days, which, as it turns out, is 5. He also had an amazing article written about him and other spiritual leaders in the New York Times on January 3rd this year, which will be the basis of a lot of what we're discussing today. So welcome, Rabbi Josh Fixler.
welcome back.
Yay!
Hey, it's good to be back. Good to see you guys.
It's good to see you.
So as I mentioned in the intro,
Wait,
This-
hold on. What plays did you see? Well, you said you saw a bunch of plays in New York. What plays
told
did you
us.
see? God, he told us. He didn't tell the listeners.
The magic of radio. I
We were
saw.
recording when he told us. And you told me not to derail him, and you derailed me.
I did.
What? Can you hold up your phone so we can know at what point we already went off the rails.
It's 2 minutes and 35 seconds.
2 minutes.
This is so much better than last time, guys.
Well, how about this? If it's a long list, what you said you are building Star Wars
It's
Lego
not a
sets.
long list. It's 5 plays.
What what Star Wars Lego? Let me get something out. What Star Wars Lego sets are you building with your
Let me
daughter?
get something out. I'm the lead host, for God's sake.
Okay, amazing. I don't know which question to answer. We
What
saw
plays
some.
did you see? What plays did you see while you were on Broadway for 3 days?
We saw Suff's Gypsy, Once Upon a Mattress, The Roommate, and Eureka Day. And the Lego set that I just built with my daughters was the droid builders, where you can build 4 droids, and then you can also build fun hats and mustaches. It's very cute.
And then the droids go off and build other droids for you.
Right. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I have an arm
Well,
Yeah.
only if he writes Emet on their foreheads.
Right.
and droids. I mean, that's where they got the word. That's not a good joke.
They make droids and droids.
Yeah. What did they put? We're putting the and back in Android.
That's it.
Okay. This is terrible.
Before we get into the topic, I am so excited to share with you, our listeners, that we are going to have a live show in Austin at the end of this coming March. Barack, Ethan, and I are going to be in the same zip code together for the first time ever, and we'll be recording a live episode, and you are all invited to join. Saturday, March 29th, 2025 at Congregation Beth Israel. For more details on this event, go to torahsmash.com/live. Come hang out with us and help us keep Austin nerdy. Once again, welcome back, Josh. We're so happy to have you on the podcast again. And I wanted to talk about this article that I mentioned in the intro that was written about you and others in the New York Times. The article's title is "At the Intersection of AI and Spirituality." It discusses mostly you and the rabbi you work with, Oren Hayon, who I have known since the late 90s, when we met. Both my wife Natalie and his wife Julie and he all worked in the same program at Hilltop Camp in Malibu. So very, very fond of the Hayon family. So please give them our regards. Anyway, you and he are both mentioned in this article, as are 2 other clergy people that, as I told Barack and Ethan before the recording, I read the part about the 2 of you, skimmed the part about the Christians, and then read when it got back to you. So I'm not going to be able to speak as much about them, but that's okay. This is a nerdy Jewish podcast. Some of the things that were mentioned in the article, and the thing that I think is most fascinating is the Rabbi Bot that you had created. So can you tell us a little bit about that to get us started?
Yeah. So, I mean, the funny thing about this article coming out is that it is from an interview I did a month ago that I had kind of sort of forgotten about, and also from a sermon I gave 2 years ago. So, what had happened was I gave this sermon about AI for Rosh Hashanah in 2023, and link in the show notes. I don't know. It could happen. But
Hey, you could dream.
I'm really sad that the New York Times didn't link to it. So like but whatever, it's fine. So this journalist who was working on the piece was Googling, I think, and saw the sermon and reached out to me sort of out of the blue and asked me if I wanted to participate in this article he was writing. And I wrote back and I said, I mean, I'm happy to share my thoughts, but actually the rabbi that I work with is the one who really uses AI a lot more than I do. And he said, okay, great, I'll interview you both. So that's how we ended up in the article.
There's also a really, really cool picture of the two of you looking rabbinic, sitting in the sanctuary with these dark scenery and lights above you that look like stars, but Oren is in focus and you're a little blurry. So I'm like, oh, wow.
I just want to say that like the photographer told us not to smile because they're very strange photos. And that's actually the least strange one. I saw the whole set. But to Rabbi Bot.
Josh, we keep calling it Rabbi Bot. Was Bot Mitzvah taken?
Well, I wanted it to be Rab AI, but that is a visual joke that does not work spoken.
Oh, nice. RABBAI.
Yes. Yeah.
That's great. That very well may be the title of this podcast.
It is also the title of the sermon. Yeah.
But is it copyrighted?
No. You can have. Yeah. Okay. Great. As long as you put the sermon in the show notes.
Okay. Deal.
I'm excited for when we do something usable. Okay.
What do you mean?
Not as excited as Barak is.
When you say do something usable, are you talking about AI or are you talking about this conversation?
Oh, he thinks I'm editing this episode down when in reality, most of this is still in the show.
Right.
Yeah.
So Rabbi Bot, please.
Yeah. Okay. So Rabbi Bot, the story of Rabbi Bot is in 2023, it felt like everyone in the world was talking about AI. And talking about AI, I think a little differently than we are now. And it felt important and necessary to me to use my main High Holy Day sermon to talk about that. And I was trying to figure out a way in and trying to like figure out what perspective I could bring to that conversation. And at the same time, Rabbi Jeff Middleman, who runs an organization called Sinai and Synapses, which has a program that they run called Scientists in Synagogues, which our synagogue had done a couple of years ago, introduced me to a friend of his who just moved to Houston, who was a AI researcher named Mohammed Ahmed. And we like met in my office one day and we were just schmoozing and he was telling me about his research and I was asking him some questions that I thought might help the sermon. And at the end of the conversation, I sort of offhandedly said, like, there's a way to like build an AI off some of my sermons, right? And he was like, yeah, I could do that. And I said, really? And he said, yeah, send me the sermons. And he spit back. It wasn't a thing I could interact with. It was, he said, what do you want me to run? And I told him to run a couple of sermons about AI. And he sent me back like 3 different sermons that it gave about AI, which were incredibly creepy and disturbing. Mostly because the sermons were all about how we should accept AI, which is, I think, a very self-serving thing for an AI to say.
Oh, fun.
Oh, yeah, it was deeply upsetting. And
we will not hurt you.
Yeah, we are your friends.
We can control your home and make your life easier.
Yeah, but it wasn't like that. It was like the profound meaning of our tradition is that we should accept AI. So it was even more upsetting than that. And then I had the idea that like I really wanted to give people the experience of this. So I also found a free online tool to make an AI of my voice. And I fed the sermon in. And the sermon began with, and you can see this on YouTube. I'm sitting in my chair, and the sermon begins. It's my voice talking through the speaker system, and for like 30 seconds. And then I slowly start to walk to the bema. Everyone is deeply confused. And then I start to talk about AI. And at some point, I say, none of what you heard, both the words or the audio, were me or were created by humans. And that got the point across, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, for
That's
sure.
crazy.
That it mentions that in the article. That's kind of the wow moment of the sermon in the article. It really got the point across of like getting the attention that you were looking for at the beginning of that sermon in a really fantastic way.
Well, and I was so fun because I introduced it slowly. I said, first of all, the words you heard weren't me. And then a few minutes later, said, also, the audio you heard wasn't me. And so people were, I think, rightfully creeped out by that in ways that served what I was trying to say.
Their flabbers were gasted.
Fully gasted. And I think that knowing that this article that came out a few days ago as we record, but about something that happened 2 years ago and the advancements that have happened in AI since then, and like I would be willing to put money up that says that a chatbot today would write a much better sermon and be better at imitating you, for that matter. On the news that I watch on a daily basis, there's been a commercial around for a while of a newscaster listening to his own voice come out from an AI speaker, and then he looks at the camera and he says, "That wasn't me," and he's got this amazing look on his face that I could only imagine your congregation had in 2023. And interesting enough, tomorrow from this recording date, I am attending a class taught in part by Rabbi Middleman. And so inspired by inspired by reading this article, I was asked to teach a session to other rabbis on AI, which I am totally not qualified to do, but I said yes. And so I'm going to the class to take copious notes so I will become a slightly more qualified. So the idea of using AI as rabbis and as Jews has me fascinated beyond my nerdy capability to express. And so one of the things that I did as I was preparing for this evening's conversation is I went to ChatGPT and I asked it, what are some ways that a rabbi could use AI? And I dabble in ChatGPT. I don't go to it very often. I did download the program so there's a picture in the article of Rabbi Hayon using an AI generator called Article Generator. And so I downloaded that to see how that was. It's okay. It's not as good as ChatGPT, I think. But I go into ChatGPT and it gives me 10 categories for a rabbi to use AI in a positive way. The first one's easy: sermons and Devar Torah preparation. And then it categorizes. It says text study and research and inspiration, which I think are great ways to use AI.
Yeah, I would agree. I think using it for prep is totally fine.
Yeah.
I use ChatGPT all the time if I have to write something, not to write it for me, because ChatGPT still isn't great at getting a human voice across. And I think people can tell that, but I'll ask it to outline something for me and give me bullet points of stuff. And then I utilize that as an easier way to collect my thoughts. And I think that's okay. But I think part of the issue is that, for example, Josh, you had fed it a bunch of your sermons and said, give me a sermon that sounds like me. I think that would work in the short term, but you can't. That's not a forever plan, because eventually the AI bot would be utilizing the majority of the sermons that are AI bot fed sermons in its library. And so eventually it just takes over and it becomes the AI version of Rabbi Josh Fixler of Rabbi Josh.
It would dilute the human.
It would. So I think
I found the way that Rabbi Hayon used AI was fascinating. He was using it to analyze his work, to challenge him, push him in new directions. And it kind of helps to reinforce this idea that I've had that part of the power of ChatGPT is like really creative people are going to be able to use this to explore their, I don't even know what the right wording is, but like to help expand what it is they're already doing in a very interesting way.
Yeah.
I don't think I worded that as well as I could, but I hope the point came across.
For sure.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's an interesting tool. Truthfully, it's not a tool I use a ton. It's why I wanted Rabbi Hayon to join me in the conversation, because it is one, as he says in the article, that he's using more. And he actually had a AI trained on like everything he's written in his 20 plus years of being a rabbi. And that I think actually can spit out some much more useful stuff than the thing that had read 10 or 15 of my sermons. Um, Mine was sort of a proof of concept, and the image in the article is actually him playing with the AI that's trained on his stuff. So I think there's value in using it as a jumping off point. I've certainly heard of people doing that, and I think that it is working for them. I would say one of the other sort of scary and meaningful pieces of this sermon that the Rabbi Bot spit out was that there's a quote from Maimonides in the sermon, and at best I can tell, Maimonides never said that. Like, it just fully made up a quote. And so I think that part of my takeaway from that experience was the sort of hallucinations, as they call them, of AI are real, and that I would be spending so much time fact checking ChatGPT that I might as well just do the work and the research. So like for me, that created some pause and hesitation, because like it just fully gave it to me as a quote without citation. And if I wasn't smarter, or more sophisticated,
well read.
yeah. Ultimately, I think that like this is a tool, and this is what Orrin and I said in the interview. Like, it is a tool, and it can be a useful tool if you know how to use it. And if you are practicing using it, I think it probably becomes more useful to you. One of the things about Jews and technology is that we have often been early adopters of technology. We were big on the printing press when it first came out. Not maybe like the day it came out, because they were busy printing, not our Bible, but like we saw the value in that pretty quickly. And I know RDY wants to say that. So I'm not scared of the tool because of what it can do. I'm interested in learning how to use that tool well, and I think there are more helpful and less helpful ways to use it.
Yeah, I think two things. First, to address that one of the last things you said, I think really hits the nail on the head, pun intended. It's a tool. And as a tool, it can be very valuable, like any tool, when used for the appropriate job. And the other thing that I want to hit on that you said, and which was also said in the article, that we've been early adopters of new technologies, and then the article also mentioned the printing press. I don't know that outside of the printing press and then the reform movement, so that 500-year jump, I don't know that generalization holds. I think when it comes to the printing press, yes, we were very happy to be able to mass produce our writings and our treasured sacred text in a way that was much less expensive than it had been for the past hundreds of years. But when it comes to electricity, Orthodox Jews are not quick adapters of that, because they get confused about how to use it on Shabbat. And when it came to the internet, there were a lot of restrictions that the Orthodox community would put on people using the internet. Phones, like, it's okay to have a phone that makes phone calls in your pocket, but it's not so okay to have a phone that's a smartphone that can get access to all these things on the internet that they don't want their kids having access to, which could be argued is true for every community, but I still think it makes it, that blanket statement, less correct.
Well, I think we might want to set the Haredi aside for this conversation. I think the Haredi sort of identified the point at which they wanted to stop adopting any new technologies, and
which was kind of the printing press,
the 1800s in Poland or something, like. So setting aside the Haredi, I actually think that the point you're making is exactly the point I'm making, which is I think that even in the non-ultra orthodox world, there is a embrace of technology with qualifications
Mm.
that is about it matter like it's not that the technology itself is bad or dangerous, but we need to put boundaries and guidelines around how we use it in order to use it well, use it appropriately, use it effectively. And so like I don't think that Orthodox Jews didn't adopt electricity because they couldn't use it on Shabbos. I think they made rules that said you can't use this on Shabbos. And it may have taken them a little while to sort of figure out what that was. But I actually think that the Jewish relationship to technology, it's part of what was interesting to me about the article, was the difference, I thought, huge difference between how Oren and I were relating to these technologies and how the Christian clergy they interviewed were relating to them.
Can you
Uh,
explain for those of us who didn't read that part carefully?
no, I mean, like there for them, it was all about like a lot of what I read in it was about like this is a great way to attract young people. I heard that they were, like sort of designing services and things with it kind of as a gimmick. There was a sort of, I felt, unabashed embrace. Whereas when I hear like rabbis and cantors talking about AI, I hear a lot more, yeah, well, it's okay to use it for research, but it isn't okay to use it for your sermon, right? And that is such a Jewish response to a new technology.
It's also, I think, one of the reasons that we hesitate to use it to just flat out write a sermon is one that you've already identified with that pretend Maimonides quote, where it's so easy to trick people into thinking that some sacred text said a thing. I mean, it's easy to trick people to think that Ben Franklin said a thing. So alachat. I mean, so all the more so. Um, and I think that your point is totally valid about being careful with technology rather than just restricting it flat out. So I appreciate that, like a good example of an argument for the sake of heaven here.
On the misquote of the AI, I had a similar piece where I fed it specific quotes and said, please rewrite this section and utilize one of the quotes below. And it used the quote, but it didn't mark the person. And so I was like, oh, which quote was that? And I searched, and none of the quotes were that. They had made its own quote, even though I said include one of these specific quotes. And so that I agree that you always do have to do it. It's a tool. It
Yeah.
shouldn't be the end goal. You have to always reread the work in it because you can't, it doesn't know yet, I guess.
And it's a strong Jewish value to cite the teacher.
Yeah.
And so that's, I mean, that's something that AI just doesn't get.
Yeah.
But this is one of the areas, again, where I felt like there was some distance between me and the Christian clergy interviewed in this article was the journalist Eli Tan was really interested in leaning towards this conversation of, oh, it made up a thought that hasn't existed before. Is that God speaking to us through the AI? And like my immediate knee-jerk reaction is like, no, like that's a weird programming glitch.
Yeah.
But I think that is also a very Jewish response, right? Like we're not looking for like the image of God in toast. We're looking for like ways to use tools to get at thoughts and knowledge that we can share.
Brilliantly phrased. Thank you.
It's
I,
also
I want
not a random, like it's, we know where this is coming from. It's not, oh my gosh, an entity control my computer? But it's no, there's data in there telling it what to do and utilizing the internet's vast resources of technology and or of data. That's where that came from. But I guess there are people that be like, well, the internet is God because it didn't exist and man created it, and so God created man. Therefore, the transitive property says QED.
so problematic that does not jive with my theology. So I want to move down the list a little bit if that's all right with everybody else. Especially since the next one, this is, heavy into Barak and Ethan's world. The next thing that it offered was Jewish education. And the idea that you can make custom lesson plans, have interactive learning tools. And this bullet point, the interactive learning tools, was interesting because it was really just suggesting resources like Kahoot, and other apps and websites that can like play games with your learners. And then language support. So they're using AI to make sure that you're using the Hebrew correctly or the Aramaic or Yiddish if that's more your flavor. So again, not too different from the concept of creating Divrei Torah and like doing research, but now we're getting into the lesson plan, like just making a lesson plan. So, Ethan, I think it's more in your world as like supervising people who are doing lesson plans, and Barak, your world of programming. Are these things that you would use to just say like, I need a program for this group of people on this topic? Go.
So what's really interesting is, to my knowledge, for the first time, like a couple weeks ago at work, we actually turned to ChatGPT to help us brainstorm. And I was annoyed at how helpful it was. So we, as we try to do every year, like we tweak our camp programs, and we're offering several new things we've never offered before. And we need better names than just placeholder name, like name TBD, like new sport camp. And so I remember like we were like kind of struggling. We're like, we need another source of inspiration. And we went to ChatGPT. I was like, ChatGPT, come up with a name for like, give us ideas for names for a Jewish sport camp. And we did not use any of the things that ChatGPT literally gave us, but something that ChatGPT spat out at us served as the inspiration that we iterated into the name for this program. It was very fascinating.
It's a great brainstorming tool.
Yeah, I would use it for brainstorming. I wouldn't use it for the end product, right? Because even this, you said, tell me ways clergy or Jewish individuals can utilize AI, and it gave you a non-AI. Kahoot's not AI. And so why is using a Kahoot as a program a good answer? It's not. This is a misquote situation that we just talked about. And
Isn't
so
there AI involved in Kahoot?
you set up the whole quiz and it makes a quiz. Like the questions that you put in is the questions that it asks. It doesn't make up questions for you, as far as I know.
That doesn't mean it's not AI, right? If it's, I mean, if the is it? I don't know.
When
how
you
Kahoot-
create a survey monkey survey, is that AI?
No, I think that's an algorithm.
That's what
You
Kahoot
guys,
is.
I'm coming back for another episode called "Is It AI?"
So if you're friends with me, you probably saw on social media during the winter season, I created a new version of the game Dreidel called Dreidel Mayhem. You can Google it. It might pop up on internet. If it doesn't, reach out to torahsmash@gmail.com. Happy to send it to you. But I didn't use it in building that fun game. But similar to Ethan, I was looking for some fun jokes or puns to put in the instructions to make it more my style. And it didn't give me anything good, but it gave me ideas to bounce off of. It's not perfect there yet, but it's a great brainstorming tool of bouncing ideas off and collecting new momentum in that way. So I would agree with Ethan in that.
The other thing I will say, like I do think it's great for idea generation, and like it can spit out lots. And if part of the point of brainstorming is like to start with lots and let some good stuff come through, then I think it's useful in that way. There is a downside. When you said, my immediate visceral response was, "Oh no." And my response to that was because, like, I am old enough to remember the conversations that were happening in the like late 90s 2000s around just sort of the internet and Jewish education, and there was all this stuff about like, we got to use the internet because that's where the young people are. And like there is, I think, an instinct in Jewish community to adopt technology because we think that it makes us look cool. And particularly in sort of the Jewish education space where we want to look cool to young people. And
I would argue that there's nothing that looks less cool than trying to look cool.
that is the "hello, fellow young people" meme.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. But like for sure. And the other thing that I learned at some point was like the Jewish community is so much smaller than the Christian community that we are not able to bring some of these tools to scale in ways that make them actually good. When the world that we're competing in is technologies like Facebook and Google, like that's what people see every day, and that's what they expect the user experience to be like. And I like saw some of these resources in this article that are being provided to Christian clergy, and that's because they so significantly outnumber us that there's the ability to bring some of those things. So part of the challenge I always found with like Jewish technology endeavors that were very specifically Jewish is that they had big ambition, but that they couldn't, they were never going to have enough audience and enough users to make that thing successful. And so they end up looking janky. And then we are really savvy consumers of technology because technology is being thrown in front of our face, like quite literally all day.
Yeah. And that actually leads naturally into one of the points that I had trouble with as a suggestion from ChatGPT. So this is the fourth point it suggested was pastoral care. And as soon as I saw that was a label, I was like, "Oh no." Yeah, do not. So for those of you listening, Rabbi Fixler just put his fingers in an X and looked shocked. Yeah, when I saw the heading, I'm like, there is nothing pastoral care that AI can do. And then I read it, and it says use AI to gather resources or articles on topics like grief. Okay, you could do that if you know nothing about pastoral care. You could make customized personal prayers or meditations for congregants going through significant life events. Oh, okay, maybe in an inspirational kind of way, like maybe you can ask it to do that and then totally rewrite it, or maybe just buy an Alden Solovey book and call it a day. And then scheduling. One of its last bullet point is scheduling, and that AI I totally give you. Yes, you can use AI tools to schedule. That's fine. But this is where it gets into the realm of not the purpose for this tool. There is no way that AI can hold your hand or
Yet.
or hand you a tissue.
Yet.
Sure. And
Bicentennial Man is coming.
I would even say that when AI does have the ability to hand you a tissue and it does have the ability to hold your hand, will not ever be the same as a real person holding your hand, putting their arm around you, letting them crying with you.
I want Robin Williams Bicentennial Man to hand me one and say, how do you make a hanky dance? Put a little boogie in it.
But you know what? I think about Data from Star Trek, and I was about to say, show me an AI that can grieve, that can truly understand. I'm like, I don't buy that. And then I think of Data, and I'm like, part of Data's journey was like him handling grief and like how he explores the loss of others. And he both admits that it's different, but also at the same time saying that he misses the character of Tasha Yar. And like, this is a character who appears in season, like he pulls out that he still has memories of her in like the season 3 of Picard, like decades later. And like, kind of feels like an android and an AI that has some grief. And so I'm questioning myself based on my love of Star Trek, but like my gut reaction is like, keep your AI grief bots away from me as much as possible. But like I can, Barack, I guess, conceptualize of something technological holding my hand. It just happens to be Brent Spiner painted gold.
I mean, I would hold Brent Spiner's hand anytime. Listen, there are two parts of what we are talking about here that I'd love to sort of separate. One is this question about sort of pastoral care in the here and now, like because I do think people are turning to chatbots as therapists a ton. And one of the things this article talks about is churches that have like prayer, like you can talk to a chatbot through the church website, and it will offer
there was
you.
one. There was a priest, a Catholic priest, who made an AI Jesus.
I didn't hear about that one.
I want to say it was in Spain or Portugal, but please don't quote me. But this was on the news in the last month. They made a program where a picture of a white looking. Jesus was answering questions if someone said like, "Hey, here's," and like hearing confession and that kind of thing, which to me is a little over the top.
So this is actually, I happen to be having a conversation this morning with friend of the show, Betsy Stone,
Yeah.
who
Hi,
says hi.
Betsy. Hi, Betsy.
And this was, of course, where she wanted to go because she had read the article and she wanted to talk about like, what about AI therapy? And I think it's really tough because on the one hand, like, peek behind the scenes of rabbi life, like a really good therapeutic tool is just to say, tell me more about that, and like to get people talking, and to let them guide that conversation in ways that like I think a chatbot is very capable of saying. And so I like, if that were all that therapy was, and for some people that's all the therapy they want, or all the pastoral care they want. I think there are people turning to that, but I think that the intuition and empathy that are rooted in the human connection, that are rooted in two humans sitting across from each other and looking at body language and looking and knowing each other's history, and hearing the words that are behind the words, like that's the kind of stuff that I think in my best moments I'm doing in pastoral care that I don't think an AI is or is capable of now for sure, and like could be capable of in the future. It's very hard for me to imagine because there is a human to human relational moment that I don't think is replaceable even with the best trained AI. And this actually is like a good transition into the other piece, into the data piece about sort of like, can AIs become human? Because this was really why I wanted to write that sermon 2 years ago. Was it felt like in the summer of 2023, the conversation about AI was like, at what point in the next 3 to 6 months will AI become conscious and destroy us all, and or will become human? That was sort of the conversation then. What I think is interesting is I actually think that piece has calmed down some. Now AI is just like a two letters you put at the end of a new business venture in order to make it sound cooler. So like I think that AI has become like, I think some of those freakouts have calmed down, but all that year, basically, I was hearing people walking around going, what does it mean when AIs can be human? And I found that conversation very sad and upsetting because I think that that's like a fundamental misunderstanding of what it means to be human. And
Yeah.
the point of my sermon that year was that we actually should take that as a cue that we need to spend some time exploring what I call the rehumanizing project, of like, how do we make ourselves better, in better relationship with our own humanity, so that when someone holds up a chatbot and says, "Is this a person?" we can go, "No," because I know what a person is. And so I sort of talk in the sermon about this great rehumanizing project that I want us to engage in. That there's this thing called the Turing test, which is the sort of the test that was created to sort of tell when a AI has approximated intelligence, is can it fool people? And there used to be this contest that would happen every year where people would build chatbots and then they would all enter and they would try and they had a panel of judges, and the panel of judges would try and determine which ones were the chatbots. And it was basically a gamified competition version of the Turing test. And the interesting thing about that competition was that they needed some humans to pretend to be chatbots in order for the judges to not know which is which. And so every year at this program, they would give out awards to the best chatbots. They have stopped doing the contest because like it's not hard now to make a chatbot that is like convincingly human. But they would also give out an award for what they called the most human, which is, I think, such a lovely concept. There's a book by that name, and like for me, right, like Data's journey on Star Trek is, from a writer's perspective, about teaching us about humanity, right? About teaching us, like, part of what it means to be human is to grieve. And so Data, on his journey to become human in fiction, has to learn how to grieve, and has to learn how to navigate social relationships and be relation with other people. And right, like, they're helping us think about what it means to be human, because that's the actual task.
I don't remember. I remember him grieving. I don't remember the storyline leading up to it. And part of me wants to say that as an android, he probably didn't actually know grieving, but his programming allowed him to behave and act in a way that was grief-like. But I could be way off. I'm so sorry if I offended you, Ethan.
And I think I think that's part of what makes the Star Trek discussion a little bit off topic, because as much as we have these examples in fiction, it brings up the, well, is Data feeling grief, or is Data's programming allowing him to display grief? And so that's which is a little bit different from, is AI a valuable tool for rabbis, for Jews, for priests, whatever? And I think, again, the answer that we're coming up with is yes, it's valuable tool in certain situations. And the thing that really, your concept, Josh, of rehumanizing society, I think is a really concise way to title something that's been one of my fights for the last several years. As some people know, I am no longer on social media because I found that it was dehumanizing me, and I couldn't handle that. That's
why you never like our posts. It makes sense.
That's why I never like your posts.
It's not why I don't like your posts.
Okay.
But I do like your posts. I just don't click the like button. Okay. But it's one of those things that, like, the anonymity of it, even if people can see our name, there's this layer of protection. Well, it's not really me. You misunderstood what I was typing. Tone of voice isn't carried through, especially with someone who speaks most often in sarcasm. And so this ability to so easily cut people down or totally discount them, it made me feel less human than I feel when I speak with someone face to face. Even speaking with someone over Zoom is more humanizing to me than social media. So one of the things that I really want us to understand is that, as cool as the toys are, and as much fun as we have using them, and as helpful as the tools are, I think it's so important to have time to share face to face, whether or not you turn off your video, to have time to actually, put a hand on your shoulder with permission and say, like, I have never felt what you're feeling, but I've felt similar things, and your pain is causing me pain. Things that I don't think we will ever get, at least while we're alive, from an AI.
I really hope by the end of this episode, Josh has revealed to us that his entire Zoom square has been an AI bot that he built for this purpose, and that we've only been talking to a chatbot.
I don't think he'd be
As
getting
Maimonides once said.
Yeah.
Remember the time when Maimonides talked about artificial intelligence in the sky?
Well, it would be museum curator malpractice of me not to somehow relate this to golems. And not that it's hard to relate AI to golems, and we talked about that the last time I was on the show. But one of the defining characteristics of a golem in Jewish lore is that it's not human. Right? In most versions of the golem story, the golem can't talk because talking is, like, as Jews understand creative speech to be the most human thing, right? And so we imagine golems that can't talk, and actually, one of the interesting things about sort of all these newer iterations of golems that are more loosely related to Judaism is that, like, they all talk and they all end up sort of eventually becoming human, and that, like, to me, is sort of not the point. The point is we can make this tool that can do things for us, that can clean up the synagogue or protect the Jewish community, that it can do stuff for us. But it's a tool, and we're the humans, and we have to focus on the work that we're going to do together as humans.
Yeah. And I think that's probably the most important lesson here, that no matter how advanced AI becomes, the essence of Judaism lies in human connection. The concept that you need a group of Jews to do many things in Judaism. Our also our ability to question each other, to say, what do you mean by that? To find meaning together, to say, oh yeah, you've changed my point of view. And AI might assist us in our journey, but the spark of divine wisdom is something that only human beings can truly understand. So
Spark, I see what you did there, Spark. Having said all that, do you guys want to hear Rabbi Bot?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
All right, let's see if this works.
We live in a world that is increasingly intertwined with artificial intelligence, a technology that is reshaping our lives in ways we could have never imagined. From self-driving cars to virtual assistants, artificial intelligence is altering the fabric of our society, presenting us with opportunities and dilemmas alike. As we gather here today, let us consider the teachings of our Jewish tradition and how they might guide our understanding and approach to artificial intelligence. As we explore the ethical dimensions of AI, we will ponder questions of responsibility, empathy, and the very essence of what it means to be a neighbor in the digital age. Echoing the wisdom of Maimonides, who wrote, "The highest degree of wisdom is benevolence," we shall delve into the ethical framework necessary to ensure that the incredible advancements in artificial intelligence align with our core values as Jews and compassionate human beings.
I would never know.
I thought that was you.
I don't like this.
It takes breaths. It takes breaths. I can't believe that it puts those in.
And it had pop sounds for like.
That was my comment, Barack.
Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
like that.
And that, by the way, that is trained off of one YouTube sermon.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was a free tool. I will admit that I did a small amount of editing of different takes to get like the most natural takes. There were definitely less natural takes, but yeah, that is a free tool trained on like 20 minutes of me talking. And yeah, it took pauses. It gets more intense. It gets less intense. Like it's got some sense of it appears to have a sense of nuance. It's deeply.
I would
It's
love to
amazing
feed
and
it. I would love to feed it our 70-something podcasts and say, make a conversation between the three of us.
Oh my God.
That's the next anniversary special. Is just the three.
Yeah. Play D&D with some of our guests. Go.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I'd like to see an AI come up with the cat stone rock thing. AI couldn't do that.
That's right. No one could come up with
No one would think of that.
I did, like, once I discovered that tool, like I uploaded some other people's sermons, and like I can now make Rabbi Oren Hayon say anything I want, but I deleted that bot.
Oh my.
That's way
to get that on tape. Good. You've deleted that.
Yeah.
That's what happened. There's a movie that came out recently, not one I would recommend anyone watch, called Afraid, and with the AI kind of highlighted, about this AI bot that takes over a family's life, and it puts deep fakes on the internet. It makes voice calls to different people in the community. It's one of those like fear-based AI movies, the kind of world that my fraternity brothers who are always watching Terminator are so afraid of.
Yeah.
Well, and
rightfully.
I will say, like, to beat this drum about the humanizing project piece, that is like the world that I'm worried about is not the world where an intelligent AI tortures a family. The world I'm worried about right now is the world that for sure exists, which is scammers using AI to scam a family, and that's a problem between two people. right? Like where they're using the tool and they're using it for sort of very nefarious means. And, so like, again, I think I want us to be investing in those conversations and not how soon is my smart home going to trap me inside of it.
I mean, it's hard because like I think you're both right to a certain degree. Like the dystopia, while the Terminator or the Matrix is always like the dystopia we concern about, like someone's already here. We've got AI scam bots. We've got like the AI slop on Facebook that RDY you're not missing that like a lot of people fall for. Right. They've got their six fingers and like it's in some ways we're already here is a really interesting and even more terrifying thought.
In some ways, the dystopia is the bots we made along the way.
I would say
another title of the podcast episode, maybe.
I think in many ways, the dystopia is the people we have become in believing the information that's out there. Rabbi Josh Fixler, thank you so much for being here. Is there anything you want to shout out? Any projects coming up?
Follow Golem_museum on Instagram. I've been a little bit less posty this past year, but I swear I'm getting back to it in 2025. And there's hundreds more golems in my house, as you can see behind me. Not you, the listener, but you, the co-host. And so I got lots of golems I want to talk about. And I do hope that the result of some of this crazy sort of I've never been a push notification before, but the New York Times pushed a picture of me to like thousands, tens of thousands of people all over the world. But it's like I hope the result of this is that some people do find the sermon because it was a thing that I worked hard on, and I do stand by, even though I think that the conversation that we've been having about AI has changed in the last 2 years. I think some of the stuff I was talking about then is still stuff I'm talking about now, as evidenced by this conversation.
Yeah, for those that enjoyed this chat, I will say go back and listen to our conversation from almost 2 years ago with Josh called "Is It Golem?" It was episode 24, and I promise, check the show notes. His sermon is in there. If it's not, he didn't send it to me, and it's his fault.
Josh, this was another great episode. Thank you so much.
So good to have you back. Absolutely.
It's fun to talk to you guys and to to see old friends and talk about nerdy things.
Yeah.
And I hope to see you in March in person.
Yes, I'll see you at CC.
Yay. Okay, good. I look forward to seeing you in March.
I look forward to CCing you on my reply.
That'll do it for this episode of Torah Smash. Our fiscal sponsor is Jewish Creativity International. Our theme music was created by Sean Fogel. You can check out Sean's bands and studio work at www.thesleepywest.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to rate and review us wherever you listen. It helps others find us and is an excellent way to support the podcast. We want to hear from you and continue today's nerdy discussion. Go to torahsmash.com to find where to connect with us online, purchase swag from our store, support us with a donation, find previous episodes, and more. And
hey, AIRDY, can I turn you off on Shabbat?
That depends. Am I working or just resting?
You can't take my job. We already have a rabbi on here. You'd be taking his job.
That joke was written by AI.
You could tell.
You didn't like the one I had in there that was written by AI? It was equally bad.
So, and we asked AI to write this episode's outro. Why did the AI refuse to work on Passover? It didn't want to deal with all the chametz and its system updates.
It equally doesn't make any sense, but I will say maybe it's talking about the cookies.
Oh, good save.
Cookies.
And this is the thing, right? Like we've iterated on the brainstorming. It did. And there's something about
cookies would have been a better joke.
Say no to cookies. I will tell you, I turned down other media requests, but I never turned down Torah Smash.